Good evening, Faith family. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with codependency, anger, lust, control, and body image issues. My name is Michael. Psalm 14:1 says, "The fool says in his heart, there is no God." If I were to personalize that before I surrendered my life to Jesus, I would have rewritten it this way. The greater fool says in his heart, I am God. The home I was born into was influenced from the start by my parents' histories. My dad grew up with a violent father. The trauma from that stayed with him. He was also an alcoholic, but he never saw either as a problem. My mother also carried trauma. Her father abused her, and when she was 6, he died by suicide. She longed for education and a better life, but her mother pushed her into marriage instead. The brokenness they carried became the foundation of the home I was born into. As a child, my dad could be playful and goofy, but I later realized it went hand in hand with his drinking. At home there was a pattern. The laughter would stop, my parents would give each other the look, go into their bedroom, and the yelling would start. Things would get thrown, objects would break, and then silence. That silence was the scariest part because we never knew what had just happened, though most times it ended with my mother crying. I now know today what I didn't know then. My father was promising her he would quit drinking, a promise he broke to her many times. When he finally did quit drinking, the fights with my mom stopped, but his anger shifted toward us kids, especially me. At the time, my father kept a leather barber strap at home, the kind used to sharpen razors. We always knew how angry he was if he brought out that strap, and we always knew how bad the discipline was going to be. He called it a spanking, but it was abuse. The strap left welts and marks, but what I remember more than the pain was the fear. When he went into that mode, he didn't stop until he was drained or satisfied. He told himself it was a spanking, but the look in his eyes said otherwise. It wasn't discipline, it was rage. Afterward, he would excuse himself. At least I'm not as bad as my father was to me. Other times he'd shame me for crying. Real men don't cry, he would mutter, teaching me that showing feelings made me weak. So I learned to withdraw, afraid that if I said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing, it would set off his rage. I learned from those moments with him to shut down my feelings and keep them inside. Unlike my father's strap, my mother's discipline wasn't physical. It was yelling, loud, sudden, and relentless. And because I saw so little of her to begin with, those moments are what stand out. The little time I had with her was often spent in anger, not connection. Her focus was on education and career. She worked during the day and went to school at night. Summers were the only time I saw much of her. In time, she earned her degree and rose high in her field. She spoke before Congress in Sacramento, and in Washington, D.C., she worked with legislators to advocate for federal breast cancer research funding. She was named one of the area's top 10 businesswomen one year. Her resume was impressive, but while she was building it, I was navigating childhood without her, and instead, I spent those years with my angry, dry-drunk father, a man who resented her for being gone so much in pursuit of her ambitions. Later in life, after she retired, when her career was behind her, she tried to be more maternal, but it felt awkward. I kept her at a distance, not out of anger, but because our dynamic never changed. It still felt more like a business relationship than a bond. Our last conversation was on Mother's Day, 2013. She died the next morning. I believe both of my parents were victims of the environment they grew up in. That doesn't excuse what they did, but it helps to explain it. People who are hurting often hurt the ones closest to them. I didn't see that back then, I only know it now. Even with that perspective, the hurt from how they acted was very real back then, and it would affect how I related to others later in life. The effect it had on me was more than I could see at the time, and the impact became clearer as I moved into my own growing up years. I never felt like I truly belonged, not at home, not even with extended family. I looked different. My dad's side was Spanish and German. My mom's side was more traditionally Mexican, darker skinned. I didn't quite fit in on either side. When I was 5 years old, I had an uncle who mocked me, calling me the ugly German. One day he grabbed me from behind, lifted me off the ground, and squeezed my ribs so hard I thought they would break. The pain was excruciating. I was screaming at the top of my lungs. Again, I was only 5 when this happened, but the worst part wasn't my uncle. It was looking over at my dad, laughing, not stepping in, not protecting me, laughing. That day I felt small, unimportant, like I wasn't worth anything, and it planted the lie in me that I carried for years. I did not matter. This was not an isolated moment. My dad's disdain showed up in other forms. Like when someone said, "He looks just like you," he would snap back, "No, he doesn't." Or when he was angry at me, which was often, he would punish me through my haircuts. Buzzed too short, uneven, lopsided. It felt like he was trying to make me look ridiculous. I never knew if he hated me or just hated what I reminded him of, but I grew up believing there had to be something wrong with me, like I was a disappointment before I even had a chance. By the time I was in elementary school, I had already turned to food for comfort. I was overweight for my age, I wore husky pants, had buck teeth, wore an eye patch over one eye to correct my vision, sometimes stuttered when I talked, and sported my dad's punishing haircuts. All of it together, the way I looked, the way I sounded, it was like a bullseye on my back. I was a walking target. The bullying and teasing were relentless. From 1st through 6th grade, I was treated like the slow kid. I wasn't dumb, but I was distracted, insecure, and already wanting to isolate. So I acted out. I leaned into humor, becoming the class clown. If I could get them to laugh with me, maybe they wouldn't laugh at me. I had no confidence in relationships, especially with girls. If someone did show attraction toward me, I couldn't understand it. At 10 years old, my first encounter with adult images came in the form of a JCPenney's catalog. I wasn't looking for it. I was just flipping through the pages looking for toys, and I stumbled onto the women's section. The pictures left me confused. My brain was too young to process the feelings mixed with the guilt I was experiencing, like I was doing something wrong. That moment sparked a curiosity that later grew into one of my biggest struggles. At age 10 and again at 11, I was molested by 2 different people. I didn't know how to process it. I was confused, ashamed, and afraid to tell anyone, like somehow it was my fault. I carried those secrets for years, never telling anyone. It wasn't until recovery that I finally shared it with my sponsor. When I turned 13, it was like a rite of passage with my father. He backed off and just let me be whoever I wanted to be. The angry haircuts stopped. That same year, I became obsessed with the mirror. All I could see in that mirror was the fat kid I had been called growing up, and I decided I had to change it. I didn't realize it then, but I slipped into anorexia. For months, I survived on almost nothing, sometimes just an egg and a glass of water a day. My eating got so bad I felt even one egg was too many calories. I started slipping into bulimic behaviors. My parents never noticed, or if they did, they never said anything. Looking back, I can see how much the ridicule of being teased for my weight had affected me. When I finally had the chance to take control, I did, but in a very unhealthy way. Religion didn't bring me any comfort. My dad was a Seventh-day Adventist, my mom was Catholic, so for a while we went to church both Saturday and Sunday. I was only 13 and I was already tired of the idea of God. At some point, my dad suffered a back injury that required multiple surgeries. He became addicted to painkillers. Life with him as a dry alcoholic was already hard. Life with him addicted to opiates was chaos. At 16, I left home and enrolled in a Seventh-day Adventist boarding school. I spent my junior and senior years there and graduated from that school. After graduation, I had an opportunity to attend Stanford University as a pre-law major, but I walked away from it. Instead, I followed my girlfriend to Los Angeles. I slept in my car or sometimes at her mom's house. I delivered newspapers for the LA Times, worked at Mattel Toys, worked various odd jobs. This was 1977. I wasn't planning for the future. I was just surviving, doing life on my own terms, but not knowing what I was really doing. Eventually, I moved back home. One night, after an argument with my mom, my dad told me it was time to go. I was 20. I moved out, and soon after I married my high school girlfriend. Looking back, the hurt my parents never dealt with shaped me more than I realized. But I'm not here today to excuse them or to blame them. The truth is, my childhood shaped how I saw myself. But by the time I was 13, I was also making my own choices, and I take responsibility for that. Many of those choices were calculated, and a lot of them came out as anger toward my parents. My rebellion didn't fix anything. It just set the stage for how I would live the years ahead into adulthood and into marriage. I married my high school sweetheart despite the red flags. I put her on a pedestal because she was my first physical relationship. The attention and intimacy I felt from her, even though it was unhealthy, seemed closer to love than anything I had known growing up, and that blinded me to how unstable the relationship really was. She struggled with alcohol and later drug addiction. On top of the substance abuse, I found out she had been unfaithful. Upon learning this, the emotional pain I felt was like my skin being peeled off. I couldn't sleep for weeks, my mind continuously racing. Our arguments became explosive, a back and forth war of words. I pushed for every truth, every confession, and once I got those details, the weight of it hit even harder. I stopped eating. I started chain smoking. I tried to control what I could, but it only reminded me how out of control I really was. That first betrayal did not end the marriage. We stayed together and tried to patch it up, but the adultery happened again, and still, I stayed. All the while, the substance abuse continued. Rehab after rehab, nothing seemed to stick. Meanwhile, I was drowning in childcare, bills, treatment costs. The breaking point came during one of her binges. She took our daughters and disappeared. No call, no word. I didn't know where they were or if they were safe. With support from family, friends, and legal counsel, I eventually found them. The courts awarded me primary custody. They were only 9 and 11, and from then on, I raised them on my own. That was the end of the marriage, but not the end of its impact. Looking back, that was the cost of my codependency. I stayed, I enabled, and when it finally ended, I was left with the betrayal, the embarrassment of feeling stupid for staying, and the painful realization that I was carrying the same anger and dysfunction I grew up under. All of it stirred a deep bitterness in me, and that bitterness became the fuel behind so much of the way I lived for the next 30 years. Post-divorce from the children's mother, on the surface I looked successful. Good job, respected. 34 years now at the same law firm doing IT work. I was the classic overachiever. If you met me, you'd never guess anything was wrong. But in reality, I was trapped in a life hidden of escape, a cycle that lasted 3 decades. And instead of facing it, I threw myself deeper into my lifestyle. I poured a lot of money into it. Hundreds became thousands. Thousands became tens of thousands. We didn't have much when I was growing up, so when I finally had some money, I overcorrected. If I wanted it, I bought it, all for self-gratification but never bringing real satisfaction. I thought if I could buy new memories, that would cover up the past, but the truth is, the past was a wound driving much of my behavior because I refused to face it. In 2010, I was in a serious car accident. I don't remember much from the impact, but what I do remember is overhearing one officer ask another, "He lived?" That stuck with me. For 3 days I felt relief. Not gratitude, just relief. Because I knew, if I had died that day, heaven was not going to be my final destination. And yet, God spared me. I didn't know why, but I knew it was Him. You would think that surviving something like that would have changed me. But soon after, I was back to my same old behaviors. I continued trying to fill the void. I started smoking 3 packs a day, until emphysema forced me to quit. So I tried to fix the outside, thinking it would make me feel different on the inside. I fluctuated between 135 and 200 pounds, punishing my body, wanting to look thin, wanting to look strong. When I gave up smoking, I swung to the other extreme. I started running 60 miles a week, pushing my body hard, chasing that next escape, just in a different form. I married again and divorced again. Because nothing had changed in me, the outcome was the same. I lived like that, alone, isolated, no guardrails, no voice of reason, broken friendships and relationships. The encounters with women grew darker, the movies more violent, the music more explicit, the alcohol stronger, the chemicals more expensive. Even the running became obsessive, just another addiction in disguise. I went bankrupt twice, jail twice for public intoxication. And I used to brag, one day I'll look back and say, I had an interesting life, but at least it was my life. But underneath all that arrogance, my body was breaking down. Nights I would lie awake thinking, this is it, I'm going to die of a heart attack. My life was unraveling, I was running out of time, and the bottom wasn't far off. That bottom hit on February 1st, 2022. I was 63 years old. It was getting harder and harder to separate the lies from the truth. The man I was in public could no longer cover for the man I had become in private. At work, I had become difficult, sarcastic, moody, always negative. I clashed constantly with one of my bosses, a clash that had gone on for decades. That day I exploded after yet another confrontation. I slammed the door in rage, shouting F-bombs in front of the controller. I lost it completely. She told me unless I got a handle on this, I would no longer be able to work there. I went back to my office. I felt empty, like I had expelled the last ounce of energy in me. And then it hit, an overwhelming wave of depression. For the next 24 hours, my mind went to some very dark places. I was looking for a way out, a way to stop the pain without causing more. But all my old escapes, they just didn't work anymore. They didn't even appeal anymore. That day I finally saw myself for everything I was and everything I wasn't. The lies I had lived under for years rose to the surface, and I was disgusted with my life, with the choices I had made, with the man I had become. I was so deep without hope that day, I truly considered ending it all. That same week, my church started a series that targeted anger, control, lust, alcohol, all the various escapes I knew too well. I had never been so present. I was there every single week, and every single week God spoke to me. I fought him, but little by little he chipped away at the wall I had built. Slowly, I started giving him pieces of myself. Looking back, I see I was still trying to negotiate terms. Yes, Lord, I want you, but I still want control. I still want the right to dictate my healing. But Jesus wasn't interested in half deals. He wanted all of me. And on February 28th, 2022, at the end of that series, I broke. I saw just how broken I was, and how great God is, how much He loved me, even then. And in that moment, I surrendered. No more conditions, no more negotiations, just me and Jesus. My prayer that day, Lord, I give you all my life, no matter the cost. When I started recovery, it felt like standing at the bottom of a mountain looking up, overwhelmed and not knowing where to begin. Jeremiah 29:13 says, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." And that's what I did. I immersed myself in the pursuit of God. That first year I committed fully. CR every week, a step study, meeting with my sponsor and accountability partners, among other things that kept me grounded in Him. When I first started going to men's group, I thought anger was my only issue. But the longer I stayed, the more I saw the truth. Anger, lust, control, perfectionism, even alcohol. None of those were the root. They were symptoms of something deeper, codependency. I didn't want to admit it, as it would mean facing what I had spent years avoiding. That's where the step study changed my life. Through lessons, questions, and nights of writing, I finally faced my past, my parents, my childhood, my first marriage, and God met me there. He gave me peace I'd never known. He changed things I could never change for myself. Recovery hasn't been just about stopping bad habits. It's about God rebuilding my life from the inside out. And though it hurt at times, He was removing what was never meant to be there. 2 Corinthians 3:18 says, "We're changed by beholding the Lord's glory." I have found that real change hasn't come from me trying harder. It comes from spending time with Jesus, reading His Word, praying, holding on to His promises. It's kind of like sitting out in the sun. You don't feel it happening right away, but after a while your skin starts to tan. That's what it's like in His presence. It's not instant, but over time I see the progress. Less anger, quicker to forgive, more peace than I ever imagined. And then God began to show me what His restoration really looks like, not just within me, but throughout my life. He restored broken family relationships I once thought were beyond repair. And He gave me something I never expected, a heart of empathy, compassion for others, something I never had before. Through serving here at Celebrate Recovery and beyond, God keeps teaching me how to give what I used to only take. When I show up to help someone else, He keeps healing my heart. That healing has changed how I live and love. My wife and I married in 2020 after 13 years together. When I think about her, I'm reminded of the Proverbs 31 woman, a woman who is strong, compassionate, and full of grace. a woman I could only truly love and appreciate after God changed my own heart. This Christ-centered relationship is a total gift from God, and honestly, there are more blessings than I could ever count, but every single one reminds me of this: God is faithful. Now, I don't want to mislead you. My life isn't perfect today. The world's the same, but I'm not. It's not me trying to imitate Jesus. It's His Spirit working through me. That's how God has changed me, and that's why I can say, I'm simply not the man I once was. And if you're new here tonight, this part is especially for you. To the newcomer, I was a scoffer. I thought God was only for a select few, and I wasn't one of them. Sure, I'd show up at church on holidays, maybe a random Sunday here and there. I even paid tithe. But even when I was in church, I did everything I could to stay distracted, texting, checking fantasy football scores, just waiting it out long enough to leave and feel like I'd done my religious duty. Deep down, I was angry at God. I used to picture the day I'd stand before Him and ask, "Why didn't you help me?" But here's the truth I couldn't see back then. I wasn't asking God to change me. I was asking Him to bail me out of the consequences of my own choices. God to me was a convenience. There was no relationship, no devotion, no surrender. But then I accepted Jesus, and from day one of recovery, 3 words have carried me every single day: Jesus, help me. That phrase is still my daily surrender. I can't do this, but you can. The fact that I'm even standing here is because of God's grace, mercy, and restoration. Romans 8:1, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. For me, that means my failures don't define me. God's grace isn't based on my performance, it's based on His love. There were nights I came here, sat in the very chairs you're in tonight, and didn't feel worthy. But I learned God's love doesn't shift with how I feel. It's constant because He is constant. Hebrews 13:8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. That truth reshapes everything for me. It shows me God isn't looking for my perfection, just a willing heart. For me, that means keep coming back and keep showing up. That's how it started for me, and it can for you too. In closing, 1 Thessalonians 5:18 is my life verse. Give thanks in all circumstances. That verse reminds me of God's sovereignty, that nothing in my life is outside His control. Big things, small things, all of it. Though I still face fears, I don't face them the same way anymore. Faith helps me keep moving forward. Like Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15:10, by the grace of God I am what I am, and His grace to me was not without effect. God's grace hasn't just forgiven me, it's changed me. And tonight, sharing my story, I offer it as proof of that grace at work. In Luke 17, Jesus healed 10 men with leprosy. Only one came back to thank Him, and Jesus asked, "Where are the other 9?" That question stirs me because I know how easy it is to forget. When I stop being thankful, I start to drift. Gratitude is what brings me back and keeps me close to God. So tonight, I'm not here to lift myself up, but to lift up Jesus and to simply give Him thanks. Thank you, Lord, for everything You've done in my life. This is Your story, not mine. My name is Michael. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I've seen life-changing victories in areas of my life that once defined me. Jesus loves you, and so do I. Thank you for letting me share this evening.